Hello and welcome to the Knit Girls. This is a special stash dash video.
You're laying on the happy right now.
I got to sleep in today.
Oh.
Usually I have to be at work at 6:50, but there's no children because it's summer, so I didn't have to be there till 8. So that made me super happy. But we are here to talk about Stash Dash. Stash Dash is an annual craft along that we do during the summertime while I'm off school. So I'm officially, Friday is my last day, because I get to hand out report cards tomorrow. Very fancy. So it will start Friday, which is May 26th, and it will run through the 20th of August. It is what you make of it, what you want to make of it. It's
the sort of basic outline is to use as much stash as you can.
Yeah.
That's just the general idea.
You can use it to stash down. You can use it as an excuse to buy new stash. You can use it to finish works in progress. You can use it in lots of different ways. So, but the basic thing is make it, own it, make it your own. You can use it to set really high goals as a motivation technique. There's lots of different ways that you can embrace the crazy that is Stash Dash. The way Stash Dash works is you can use one of our approved, it's a virtual dash to use up stash or finish some works in progress. Crafts that we allow include knitting, spinning, crochet, tatting, loom knitting, machine knitting, including circular sock machines, and weaving. This year we've added a level. We're going to have, because we know that not everyone has a lot of time to craft, so we added a 1 kilometer level. So they progress as 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, and 15K levels. There's a chatter thread where you can chat up a storm. You can put a post in there as like a placeholder to keep track of what you're working on, and people can comment. But in the end, you're going to have to choose a level, just one, and you're going to have to try to work towards that level. You can choose it from the beginning, like I'm going to be crazy and post in the 15K, and so is my friend Jessica probably, because we're crazy together. But Leslie likes to wait until she sees how her crafting is going, and you can do it up until the last day. You can wait until the last day to declare a level. It's whatever works for you. Once you declare it, you post it in that finishing line thread. We ask that you stick with it, and you are only going to use that one post. So what you'll do is you'll favorite it. That's what I do, because that makes it very easy to get back to. I just click on it in my favorites and it appears right there. I guess it depends how often you post on Ravelry. If you're not posting on Ravelry a lot, it's easy to go back into your chatter history and find too. But if you post a lot, if you're a chatty Cathy, like Leslie and I are,
I'm not as much as you are,
then it might make it a little bit more difficult to find. So you want to maybe favorite that post so you can go back to it easily. You can update it whenever you finish an object, or you can be like your friend Jessica and update it every Sunday. We do ask when you post that you put the name of the pattern, or if you didn't use a pattern, what the object is, how many meters you used, and what your total, at the very bottom, what your total finished meter, actually at the very top, what your total finished meters are.
And there is at the beginning of every level, the first post explains all this.
Oh yeah, it will once I get them up.
Right. It comes time where I hate it because there's like 10 sticky threads and it makes me crazy. But that is the way it is.
It is how we have to roll. We can unsticky them.
Well, no, I like that they're sticky, but I just feel like because not everybody participates in Stash Dash, that sort of takes over the group.
It does.
3 months a year. But I also don't like the idea of creating a separate group, because this is something we've sort of fostered, mostly Laura, for years and years. So I like to sort of retain ownership of it, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. Don't want to do the short row heel. Anyway, I'm going to come back to this.
I derailed Laura. She was like in a rhythm.
Also, I got to a point where my socks are ready for their heels, and I'm like, I'm going to do a short row heel. What kind of short row heel should I do? Anyway. Alright. So, you post the meters total that you've used at the top. You can update them with a picture of the project name, and how many meters you use. You can do one picture per project, or you can do what Jessica does, and lay out but like she might have 4 finished skeins and take a picture and then put, okay, working from the left to the right, this is what this is. So you don't have to do an individual picture for everything. And if you're doing a lot of the same object, it's probably better to put them all together. But that way we know what's going on.
You do have to photograph everything.
We want proof.
They don't have to be separate photographs. In fact, it'd be even better if you would, you know, it's the small things you can put into one. It helps pages load faster, but either way, we would like to see a picture of everything.
Yeah, we like looking at pictures.
Yes.
And sometimes we go through that thread, and if we find something that we think is really pretty or really clever, then we gift people patterns. So you should totally make sure that you have things on your queue that are giftable.
Ravelry gift
list.
Gift list?
Gift queue.
Wish list.
There you go.
That's what it's called.
Let me think of what else. So you post in that finish line thread. That's just for posting finished objects. The chatter thread is for chatter. Once you post it, that's the level you're on. You can't erase it and then start over at a different level. It makes it super complicated. Alright, so some frequently asked questions. We get asked a lot with Stash Dash.
And Laura, sort of, as trends change and people take up different types of crafts or different things become popular, the rules get modified or amended.
It's a living document.
It is. It's a living, breathing thing.
Alright, so can we count things towards Stash Dash that we finish before May 26th? You have to do some form of the craft, of that craft's work on it. If it's knitting, you can bind off. You don't have to knit a row or a couple stitches. You can just bind off. I think we include that in the knitting process because you can't finish. How are we going to know?
Honestly. If you lie, you're just cheating yourself. But yes, I would agree.
You have to look at yourself in the mirror.
I think if you're spinning and you just ply it, that counts.
Yeah, I think that counts.
Why wouldn't just binding off?
So, plying counts, binding off counts for both knitting and crochet. Doing the finishing work for weaving, like as long as it's still on the loom and you know you can do the sewing at the end. You don't have to actually be weaving, but what's that called?
Hem stitch.
Hem stitch at the end. Because that's part of the finishing. Off. Yeah, it's like binding off. That is part of the finishing, or the fringe at the end. That is part of the finishing. So you're doing some kind of, besides just weaving in ends, you're doing some kind of the form of the craft to finish it. Does that make sense?
Now, because I'm playing devil's advocate.
Okay.
What if you have all the parts of a sweater and you just have to...
We're talking about seaming later. So seaming... Let's skip down to seaming.
Okay, sorry.
So if you are, one of the questions is, I have a ton of blanket squares and I just need them to be seamed, or I have a sweater that's in pieces, I just need to seam them, can I count them? If you're not doing part of that craft, if it's just seaming, then no. Okay. But if you have to do some afterthought buttonholes, and pick up some stitches, or pick up, if you're steeking and then picking up, then that would count. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because you're picking up and knitting, or crocheting, or whatever. Yes. Okay.
And while these rules may seem arbitrary, maybe they are. But this is our imaginary contest, so...
There you go. And you can always ask me next year to change them.
Yeah, because there were a couple of rule changes this year based on...
Yeah, there were. And there were the year before as well. Also, if you find me in person to ask me, I'm less likely to say no. Alright, so... We use meters to keep track of our progress. That's what kilometers, meter is part of kilometer if you look at the bigger word with the prefix versus the smaller word.
If you don't know how to convert, just ask Google to do it for you.
Yeah, Google will totally do it for you. And if you're creating projects in Ravelry, like project pages, it'll do it for you as well. When does yarn become stash or fiber? Anytime something enters your house, it becomes stash. So, I'm going to say anytime it enters your possession.
I would go with possession.
So, let's go with possession. So, if I am going to Buffalo, New York later this year, and this summer, and if I decide to pick up yarn on the way, which I probably won't because I'm not going to have a lot of time, then once I get it, it becomes part of my stash. Does that make sense? Awesome. So, once it becomes part of your possession... Yeah, once it enters your possession, then it's stash.
So I'm going to hop back here for a second because we were talking about blanket squares.
Uh-huh.
So if you have all the blanket squares and all you're doing is seaming, then you don't get to count all the blanket squares.
No. So, blanket squares. Blanket squares are weird, y'all. They're always weird. And I'm going to do a rule change with blanket squares this year. So, blanket squares. The rule has always been in the past, if they are self-contained squares that you are using for a swap, or if you can count them as their own entity, because sometimes people like knit blanket square patterns, but they use them as dishcloths, or like we were involved in a blanket square swap for many, many years. Or a hexie puff swap, then those are done, right? You're not doing anything else with them. The rule change is going to come about this year. Basically, if you can figure out yardage for a blanket that you worked on, like this is the yardage that I used, then you can count it.
So, example,
if let's do 3 different examples. So if I'm doing blanket squares, and I knit 4 of my blanket squares, or I knit 1 stripe, because sometimes people knit them in stripes. You're looking at me.
Strips?
Yeah, strips.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Yeah,
Strips.
I was picturing a striped blanket and trying to figure out what we were talking about.
Okay, strips. Those words look the same. It's been a long day, y'all, and I didn't get up early, so I need more caffeine. So if you're doing strips, then and you can figure out the meters that you use in the strip, then you would count that.
Assuming that you don't finish the blanket during stash.
Yeah, if you finish the blanket, you get to count the whole blanket.
But, for example, we're talking about like mitered square
So
style.
mitered squares. If you're doing one of those mitered squares blankets, if you will take a picture of where you start and how many you end up with, and say I knit like 45 little mitered squares and each of those take 10 meters, then you would get 450 meters worth of credit for stash. Same if you're doing like log cabin with a group of friends. So you can't count the whole blanket. You can, in that case, you can only count, like if you're doing it with friends, you can't count the whole blanket meters. You can only count what you knit. You can't count all your mitered squares unless you finish it during stash, and then the entire blanket counts.
And if the idea of trying to keep up with all that yardage for different yarns makes you a little bit crazy for a mitered square blanket, I would probably just weigh it and take that weight and average out how much all the different sock yarns, like, 10
well, your needles
grams
would
per...
still be in it. So how would you weigh
No, I
it?
meant if you finished it.
Oh, okay.
Well, you could always weigh a set of needles as long as you had the same kind. And then weigh it. We're not against you using...
You have to do the math.
Yeah.
That is the rule.
We're not against you using a fair estimate. Just don't knit a hat and tell us you used 1,000 yards.
Would be an awfully big hat.
Speaking of the math, that is another thing. It is mentioned in the beginning of each one of the threads, but you need to put a running total at the top.
Yeah.
We adore you guys and thank you for being part of our community, but we don't like math to begin with, so we're not going to do yours for you. So you have to put a running total, preferably at the top of your post.
Yeah, and I do a sample post, usually, for each thing. I should get on that. Alright. So.
Do I need to move the thing?
I think you do need to move down. So if you have to finish... Okay. So... If you are doing something, it has to be finished to count, with the exception of blankets, because they're weird. So you can't knit like half a sock and say, hey, I knit half a sock. I use 100 meters on this half a sock. For wearable things, it has to be finished. Now, finished would mean you would wear it out of the house as is. So, use that
as a guideline.
Alright? If you can count a single item, though, if it's done. So if I finish 1 sock, that sock is done, right? So that counts. If I finish 2 socks, then the pair counts, no matter when they started. Can you double dip with other knit-alongs, crochet-alongs, craft-alongs. Of course, there are some awesome ones going on.
Mm-hmm.
Amy Florence has a Brit Cal that's really cool. Boston Jen has the splash party thing that she does in the summer, which is really cool. So you can double, triple, Camp Loopy, anything that you want to double or triple. Make it work with as many as you possibly can. We do knit-alongs for SSK also. How do you measure spinning? You measure the single's length in meters. So if your finished yarn is a single, it's that yardage. So if I spin a thing of singles, and it's 600 yards, I would count 600 yards. If I have a finished 2-ply and it's 300 yards, I would count 600. So let me walk you through that process. I have 300 yards, but I plied that, so 300 times 2, because that's the number of plies, would equal 600.
If you had 300 yards of a 3-ply, that would be 900 yards of singles.
Exactly.
So most spinners are relatively familiar with this, but you can ask plenty of questions. We're happy to answer them.
Definitely. That's what the chatter threads through. I will ask if you are asking a specific question to me, like you're wanting something specific, and people will help you with this too. I've already been magic linked twice today. They will they'll make sure that I see it usually.
Yeah.
So, but if you magic link me, I'm almost guarantee I might take a couple seconds where I have to think about it, or like this week I'm at work and Ravelry is still blocked at work because it's a social network. So, I might not be the fastest this week, but I'll get there. All right. So, magic link me if you have any specific questions.
Magic link Laura if you have any questions, because I would just ask Laura. This is her baby. She's the maven of Stash Dash, and I don't get in the way.
So one of the rule changes from last year was if you hold yarn doubled. So someone at DFW put a great case forward for holding yarn doubled. If you use yarn doubled or tripled or whatever, you may count the total amount of yarn that you use. The end. All right? How do I measure my meters? Do I just go by what the pattern says? If you think it's accurate, you can go by what the pattern says, or you can use a scale to get a super accurate count. And I think we're going to do a tutorial, a little brief one, on how you use a scale to figure things out.
That's fine.
This weekend.
I want to try out my McLaurin yarn balance, too.
Okay. You can totally try that. There you go.
Laura's like, I'm not involved in that in any way.
that involves more math than my brain can... Anyway, alright, yeah, McMorrin yarn balances, which are hard to locate now. I think the company that was making them went out of business.
Woolery still carries them.
Do they? Okay. So, that is also an accurate way to get meterage. Does weaving in ends, sewing on buttons, or adding ribbon or a pom-pom count? Only if you did some form of the accepted crafts during the Stash Dash time period. Does the meters of your pom-pom or fringe count? Yes, they do. Can you cast on new projects or are only works in progress allowed? You can cast on as many new projects as you finish, but they keep in mind that they only count if you finish them. Do whatever makes you happy. If I rip back and reknit something, can I count the meters for the entire thing? Yes. If I have a pair of socks that has a hole in it at the cuff, I'm going to rip those back, reknit the cuff, then I get to count the meters for the entire pair. A lot of times people will do sweater surgery during Stash Dash. I did that a couple years ago where I had sleeves that were way too long, and it takes a lot of sleeve to get longer than what my arms are.
I think that'd be a good time to do darning on your socks that have holes in them.
Darning's just sewing though, so that wouldn't count. Like if you cut back and reknit, that's what counts.
Oh.
Darning wouldn't count.
But
don't listen to Leslie.
Darning uses like weaving and stuff.
It depends on how you darn.
Don't listen to me, apparently.
Darning doesn't count. See, arbitrary rules. Jerk.
I'm not running Stash Dash, so I really have no room to complain.
Hey, how about this? If you put forth a good case, like if you're actually doing woven darning, then maybe we can... A lot of people just darn by... just kind of like weaving in ends. That would be weaving in ends. That wouldn't be really darning.
Well, not really. Like if you've got a hole on your heel, weaving in and in isn't going to do crap for you. You basically have to rebuild the heel.
If you're rebuilding the heel, like, a lot of people will reknit it at that point. I don't know. We'll take darning on a case-by-case basis. How about that? Just PM me. See, now you're making more work for me, lady.
I'm assuming anybody out there still darns. You know, I don't know that happens.
I've darned before, but it was basically just weaving in. Like, I had holes in the corners of my socks where, like, my afterthought heel had not gone over before I picked up more stitches for afterthought heels.
I've blown out heels before, and they're still sitting in a pile.
And sometimes I just throw those out and say, oh, darn.
It depends, yeah. If they're really worn. And
if they're felted, then sometimes it's not worth the effort.
All right, we've gotten off track.
We have. All right. So if you're reknitting something, then it counts, or recrocheting. If you have a pair of something and one is already done, you get to count the meters for both of them.
Do you realize that you do that?
Yeah,
with your
all
hair?
the time. And now it's short. So when I was little, I'd chew on it, which is not
a lot of kids do.
Not a productive element. Anyway, yeah, I do all the time. I'm sure our viewers have noticed that too, but now they're really good.
Well, you don't usually have your hair down when we record.
That's true too, but when it's down, that's usually why it's up, actually, because I fidget with my hair constantly. I'm a fidgeter in general.
All right, I think that's mostly it for Stash Dash.
There is going to be a Stash Dash hashtag. It's going to be Stash Dash 2017. So feel free to use that on all social media. I don't think anyone else is stealing Stash Dash, so
at least not the name.
You can go ahead and use that hashtag, and I'll add that to the commonly asked questions too. All right. If you have any questions, you can either PM me or hotlink me. PM me if you don't want to put it on the board, but
or
typically
ask in the chatter thread, because a lot of the people that participate have been around the block with this before, and so they can answer questions without having to bring it to Laura. So,
well,
not that it's a problem, but you might get a quicker answer.
You might.
So
it might be incorrect, but you might get a quicker answer.
Oh, okay. Well,
we're gonna record a podcast now.
Again.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.